Okay, before I forget this, let's go. Two things. One of them is this region. So just to remind myself, this region. Okay. Other is... Let's start... Pardon me. I went too far. Okay, here we go. Let's start here. Okay. So, it occurred to me. Let's pull up some images. Gujarat. Okay. So I talked about how while this storm is here, it's putting a current in this direction, which is then building a mass, which then puts a back pressure, which then begins to deflect the current, which then causes the storm to move to a new position opposite to where it's deflecting the current over here. Then it produces more of these structures within the region, like the Barda Hills here and Alec Hills here. And then it moves further down here and discharges into Gurnar with a opposite current. And when it's when it's here, I didn't draw it, but it has a current out that way. And when it's here, it has a current out that way at a 90-degree angle at this point. And then at a exactly split angle back to the mantle puncture hole. So it comes in and then splits at a 90-degree angle at this point. And then it comes in and split at a 90-degree angle. So straight in at a 90-degree angle relative to here. And then it splits this half and goes out at 135 degrees off of each of them. To produce another underwelling, so the current going out to the side is underneath the surface, while the current going this way is atop the surface. So, then again, same thing here, atop the surface, beneath the surface. And this is probably playing a critical role, as well as it stops in between here and here, it stops in the region of Chamarti and Cho'Gath, I believe. Cho'Gath, either of those. Pardon me, League of Legends makes me tend to think Cho'Gath, but then it sounds a little like the character, which is a little more, maybe Cho'Gath might be better. Anyway, so the current goes underneath here, and that probably plays a role in that this region was like a special, like it had a current probably generally going beneath it at all points, enough to just like this region just had so many currents beneath it that it fell to a lower elevation and like a slope downward. It's almost like the landmass itself of the continental crust is like a sheet, like a sheet of paper that it doesn't matter that it's like doesn't have the support structure. It just like sags inward, and but it stays unified as because it's got bonds within the sheet that hold it together, kind of like a graphite, carbon graphite sheet, like something of that nature, where it's just bound together energetically enough where it across this, because it's not just here, it's even out here. This region is just, it's just like draped atop the support structure that's more present in where a continental shelf has support structure. Okay, so I need to go back one more time. So that's a Gujarat, but before it gets to Gujarat, here's Dwarka. Okay, definitely could use some help with that. Okay, so there's a vortex weapon that was used right here, and then the storm goes over here. It punctures the mantle by causing currents from space to flow through the vortex storm down through it to the Earth, where it then flows along, as essentially probably along the surface in this region because the surface is maybe too rigid, and then it flows into this region where it just goes into it and begins to flow down to where it punctures the mantle. And then it punctures the mantle. And so at this stage, what I've kind of come to conclude is the storm is generally in this location right here for an extended period of time, and it only gets to here when the Deccan to cause the basalt outflow to sweep across India around 66 million years. So like that the storm gets to this location is critically tied to the Earth's expansion process, and then it very rapidly goes through this, but in a way where like it's here longer, it's here a little less long, it's here very short, but it does stop like here relative to between, where it just kind of quickly moves and stops here for a very short time. Of all of them, it's the shortest probably. And then here it just discharges, just like a very energetic one. Whether or not it's long lasting, unclear. I'd say it may be like this storm at that once it discharges, the storm then just kind of is able to dissipate enough where the nucleus of the storm becomes the South Atlantic anomaly essentially, and is no longer having this appearance. But so the doom shape is here for a long time, and then it moves generally through this region over to here, and here. So that these positions, the reason I want to talk about this is because recently, my last video or so, I was talking about how the mantle puncture hole releases a current that goes above it and below it and out and both to the east, and just essentially goes along the coastline, or the the equator, above and below the equator, creating with a current above and a current below, creating two sides of this like mound feature here, is what I was saying. And it's flowing up this way, and ultimately the currents going around and going up into North America along the coastline here, which is what I've been looking at most recently. But so it occurred to me, if we, of course it lets me turn it like more in the way I don't want it, but it won't, like, it's hard to get it to turn the way I would like it to be. I really don't know how to make it turn appropriately. That's better. Okay, that's better. Okay, so if we look here, when this... Actually, let me do it. Essentially, this is what I'm getting at, is, like I mentioned, the storm in the beginning of this process sat here for an extended period of time. And I've been realizing that, and when the storm was over here, it was directly interacting with the mantle upwelling from this location and causing a current out atop the Deccan Traps region, as well as underneath it over here, causing this when it's at specific points. Like here, when it's at the top one, I believe it's also causing a current just like through it, and I'm mounting this pile here against resistance from the other side. Like here, this resistance. And so because of that, it made me realize, well, when it's here, like I've been discussing how there's a current coming out of here going this way across underneath Europe. This current that goes up this way, especially this way. Also here, so maybe even just the whole width. It may have been the whole width across, and then as the current flowed, it began to divide into two channels, one above and one below, that created this mound between. Where this one went across to North America, and this one went upward into the Arctic, cutting around to the edge of where the crust fractured, which then widened over time, but to that edge, and then up along the Arctic and into the Arctic. And then it wraps around and comes back down and collides here with essentially, like, here's the mantle puncture hole, the current going out this way, generally putting a sideways pressure upward from just the sheer volume. Instead of going forward, it can also go to the side, so it starts to go to the side, but then the current comes back around and collides with it, so they form basically like this equilibrium. Notably, right here's the mantle puncture hole, and then it's flowing this current, and I've talked about this in depth in the videos more about the Himalayas, but essentially what appears to happen is this structure right here is it's almost like a cushion region. So it's this large pocket of like a space that current from the mantle puncture hole can flow in upward and into, instead of just flowing out across under Europe. And it can flow up into these, just filling them with more pressure. But then what occurs is the side here that builds up becomes like overwhelmed, so it can essentially release the pressure either through here or up through this way, or even it looks like a lot of it maybe this way, coming out of the further end of the cushion, where like it got squeezed up that way and then out across. But this current that's coming across, it occurred to me, well, if we look at it, here's the storm. It goes right along the very edge of the continental crust, and then it goes in two directions. One around Saudi Arabia. Sorry, Yemen, Oman, et al. Sorry guys, around the Arabian Peninsula. Saudi Arabia is only up here and not here. Pardon me, guys. I know. Pardon me. Okay. But it goes this way and around the Arabian Peninsula and into severing the Arabian Peninsula from mainland Africa here. Just cutting in here. And then up through the Red Sea. What if that's when the Red Sea was parted? While that's going on, unbeknownst to Moses, this vortex weapon has been used nearby, and it then causes a current to flow this way, which then at some point Moses passes this body of water that's not nearly as big as it is, and then after he passes it, this current just comes through. severing the red, like severing. I don't know if that fits the description at all, but that would be so cool. Because I was thinking, like, what if this process isn't like a year? Like, what if a year is actually the like when the flood happens is actually the reason it's staggered from when Dwarka was attacked by a vortex weapon is because when the vortex weapon attack occurs, it doesn't just like cause the Earth to supernova. It begins the process, and this storm just lingers and lingers and lingers. Maybe like the red spot on Jupiter. Maybe it's like feeding into Jupiter in a similar way. I don't know. But it just it lingers, sitting in a position though. So that's it's red spot like. And it while it's here, it's just directing the current in two directions while while feeding energy into it at maybe perpendicularly to that. Or it's over here. Maybe it's like over here, like sitting here. Essentially, it goes along this coastline, goes here. But then it goes up here, goes around, does that, runs into here, it fills this thing. So like I was going to say, I didn't mention this yet, but it fills this thing when it outgasses the pressure from this current coming across. So there's a current that comes this way, runs into the pressure that builds in this general region. Like this pressure just probably initially just kind of flows over into this region, but then a current comes around and sweeps it over, and just this over time is structured to be the end result of these currents where things stabilized. So it's not necessarily representative of how they were throughout the process, just how the process ended. And so when this current's coming across, it's basically putting a portion that bends off this way and goes up and causes the cursed magnetic anomaly, and another portion that bends off and builds as mound as a natural bend point against the resistance, such like this triangle thing. Even with these pockets, this is very common in how they look when I've seen these in other places where there's just these pockets within it. And then it bends around, and interestingly, it puts pressure on this, pressure, and that then puts pressure on this region, which then has to, seemingly at some point, expel some of the pressure. And so when it does that, or sorry, I said that backwards. The current's pressing on it, and just pushes it down. But then this current just keeps filling this, pushing against it, so that this extension here, this arm, is physically moving across time, vibrationally up and down as this releases. Then this moves as far down as it can, but then it begins to fill up, and it physically begins to put a pressure against it again to move it back in a way where it ultimately creates the Himalayas. Because if we look at the Himalayas, that's right here. It has like just many waves across it, where there's a big wave going across like that, but there's smaller waves that all kind of stem from like right here-ish, where they just vibrate off of it. And we can even see, where is it? Here. This. It's like vibrationally just many wavelengths. And it's like the sounds of the Himalayas. We can see one here that very distinct. And then another, like, bit here. It almost looks like the fish. The Jesus fish. Like it wasn't a full 2 wavelengths, so it kind of ended shorter here. And I don't recall off the top of my head the full extent of this. I would say the sounds of the Himalayas, it's called. I can recall because I thought it was a cool name. And so that one, if you want more info on the Himalayas specifically. But so my thought is generally, to go back to here, is this storm sits here for a while, and it is what directs this current. It directs a current out this way and a current out that way. And then interestingly, the current that goes out this way, mind you, this is on a smaller globe, so this is actually like flat. Like if on the smaller globe, this is actually as if it were to be at the same longitude. Longitude. Which one is that? Like this. Now it's kind of like it doesn't have this. It doesn't quite look like that. It looks kind of curved upward, like not quite the same, but then it was. And it even maybe is related, like the fact that it kind of goes abruptly up here and abruptly up here is probably related to the fact that it opened up space here between them, making it more visibly like off of exact to being just like a ring around the earth. But interestingly, because of this like region and the current coming back around, it produces like a second electron orbital. I don't know, just thought, I don't know, just this like second ring that's here. It's not quite as prominent, but maybe was more prominent at some point before all this got like blown apart. Like, did the current go like this and begin to go through here and then this way maybe? Maybe that's what's going on, is this current comes across here and then begins to cross. And when it's crossing, that crossing of currents induces novas. And that's probably when the Permian Triassic Siberian traps events occur. Essentially, the Siberian traps are caused by the breaking of this boundary under the continent so that basalt can just freely flow into this region, which was really not yet experiencing it. And then it broke this boundary and flowed in. I gotta see when this is thought to have occurred. Let's just see. It's hard to say when people think the Bible claims the parting of this Red Sea to have occurred. Have to just look at the timeline, I guess. Exodus. Is this before or after the flood? Part of me, I don't know if Moses is. He's like, isn't he the flood guy? That's not the frickin'. Flood Bible. The flood is in Genesis. So Moses is definitely after that. Okay, so that would not fit. Okay. It would have to be before the flood having happened. For okay, it was just like, because I really feel like there's this like lack of alignment in the Bible versus the other scriptures, but like that it's like there's something that makes them more understandable that I'm not aware of or not picking up on, like something of that nature, where there's just a period of time where this process is unfolding, where it's not a year. I've been just kind of no admittedly assuming this process took a year, and it may have taken thousands of years to at least the initial phase where the earth was experiencing some signs, but it wasn't I I don't know. I think I still think it was rapid enough that it wasn't more than on the scale of like years and not like centuries. Maybe centuries, but maybe not thousands of years. At most a couple thousand. uh, just trying to figure out what's happening, guys. I don't know. That's the thing is I don't know. So the storm, though, back here is certainly we can distinguish the storm initially was sending out jets, like a quasar, maybe it is like a quasar, like it literally was like a quasar. It was on the surface. It punctured. It was some system that formed that punctured the mantle, and then energetically interacted with it to a point where it began to have jets, and those jets were at certain angles during the process. Initially, the jet out along this surface, I guess, just started to physically travel along, as I've mentioned in the past, like the ammonite shell of the Earth's crust in a way where it just went right down, like into the crevice, kind of like here, how it has these distinct crevices of this here that were the boundary. I talked about this in the last couple videos, were the boundary. So like there, like that kind of thing. So like the current moved to a region like this between Africa and Europe, and then just went down it, and it began to physically separate them, causing a fault line in this direction. So it may or may not have been on the surface at that stage, although I don't think it reached the surface until it upwelled over here. So there's probably only undercurrents until, especially because the earliest oceanic crust is in the Mediterranean. So it's almost certainly that the it was an undercurrent initially and just completely, but the storm was still energetically interacting through the crust to cause it to flow in two directions, because the storm probably just was physically into the earth enough where it like reached the mantle itself, maybe even possibly in a way where like it was as if it was on the surface of the mantle and in its like nature of things, rather than being like as if it was on the surface of the earth like a tornado or a hurricane would behave. Probably something of that nature, maybe not completely, but like to a degree. And so it sends a current out in two directions directionally that then wrap around that way and go out that way and start to go down along the coastline here, I guess. I mean, it's just separating the Arabian Peninsula from India. I believe this is how they were connected. It does kind of look like it. Let's look at Pangaea. One thing it's good at for is to at least get a position of the things it puts together. Like this. So the storm is pretty much here, which makes sense for why it would generally appear this way, because the storm is like right there and it cuts this way. And then maybe this way is where is Madagascar? Okay. It is apparently next to Tanzania. I just want to make sure. Here. Mozambique. Oh. Oh, so it was up here. Okay. I always felt it, like, in terms of my line of reasoning made more sense up here, but that it looks like it was here. Like, it looks like it was right here, just from its shape. But interesting, it was here, and maybe that... I mean, it makes more sense that it was here, though, and let me explain why. Because here's the nucleus. Here, where a current was coming in. Let me get rid of these now. Pardon me, guys. A current was coming in this way, running into this nucleus, which then it wrapped around, but it also cut in half through it, and then that current cut across and just exited. And where it exited was at Madagascar, probably right here, causing this like indentation in it, while it just generally put pressure against the like less part of Africa chunk of Madagascar until it's separated. But it, interestingly, it probably is in line with this like major region where the current coming down from that was going down this way ran into the current, and they just and started to vibrate with a negative energy one and a positive, where this caused like mounds and this caused like emptiness to reduce the elevation, and then vice versa down here, and it just vibrated. Okay, so Madagascar was there. Let's go back to this. Okay. Mind you, Australia right here was connected to Mexico right here. Where's the Yucatan Peninsula in this? It's probably this. Yeah, Cancun. They still have it open. It was open. It was always open. It was always clearly open like that. Like, we didn't think this changed across time to the point where it probably was together at some point. It looks pretty much like it was like... I don't understand sometimes, you know. Like, what are we doing? But this current came across and went... Okay, so it went down... When it goes down the east coast of the Arabian Peninsula, it's also going down the west coast of India. Okay. Okay, so we're getting somewhere. So it begins to open the space between India and the Arabian Peninsula so that any currents of basalt, because I'm like, where is the basalt over here? Like, well, shouldn't there be Deccan traps like here? Like, where is it? I've never heard of like anything relating the Deccan traps to like over here. Like, where is it? It must be there. But apparently, it's plausible that the current severed the space between them so that any like Deccan traps that flowed beyond the crust, the pre-existing crust boundary, just fell down into creating the Réunion hotspot. So, boom. It makes sense. It makes actual sense that there's not Deccan traps over here. So that's good. Although there may be some signs of it. There's certainly signs of the wind. Okay. So then the current cuts down there. Just maybe like a 90-degree angle. I don't know. From where the storm is versus this way. Well, that's such a yin, a positive negative. Whoa. Whoa. I think this is Tarim Basin here. Maybe that is, though. Wow. I don't know if I ever noticed how loud it is like that. And the image is kind of multiple images together, so it's a little hard to say exactly, but it does look like there's like a figure eight, an inner figure eight here that has really distinct nodes of a positive negative node. And then even like a shallogram, like if we go back to shallograms, like this one, kind of like this. Maybe not as many of them, but kind of like that, how it has this segment here. And then maybe even like that, 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 that. And then a single one over here, and then maybe elongated. Hard to say, that was just hard to say at that point. Although it looks like maybe this current cutting across might have influenced anything over there. Also, it looks like this line, I noticed as I did that there's another that like figure eight looking spot here. So it goes down that way, right into the East African Rift. Which means, let's take a look when that formed. I think it was in the hundreds, 150. Or it might be significantly younger. Whatever. Okay. So this only happened after the Earth expanded. Like when the supernova occurred, when the Deccan traps were already formed. Basically, I guess an undercurrent is still flowing. That flowed initially along the entire eastern, like it didn't create okay, so it did not create this until Interesting. So maybe it was maybe. No, I don't know. I keep going back to this Red Sea thing. Like, wouldn't it be cool if? But maybe not. Okay. If like the East African Rift Zone was kind of formed in the time frame of Moses, then so that would kind of be like, okay, so Moses was alive after 66 million years radiometric dating. According to radiometric dating, his period of when he was alive. So like people were alive while this was happening, and it was only influencing certain regions at certain times, maybe. And in ways where it really wasn't as like we would expect it to be according to current interpretation, where this would just mean the end of everything, but apparently not somehow, where life went on maybe, like as this was occurring, maybe it was slow enough to not be so overwhelming as to just, but like quick enough to like keep us unified with it, almost like we don't even notice it happening, like we're just speeding up in a car because we're like one with the earth already, so we just move with it to a point where maybe like at times we notice that we're accelerating and decelerating, but not the same. Like the earth is trembling, the earthquake. Like it just is so overwhelming of an earthquake that it doesn't even feel like an earthquake, maybe. Like it feels like we were 100 miles east of here yesterday because we were like on the earth because the earth just moved us, but we just moved with it. Like that maybe is possible when there's all this like buoyancy from currents flowing in here. I don't know. But it does look like initially the current that cuts across that way does begin to go down specifically the entirety of underneath, seemingly underneath this region to a degree. Let's look here, like right here, like under this stretch, maybe here. Especially there though, and then down here and just down low without this opening yet. And that this was when the currents were adjusted, so like when the earth expanded, the pressure this way was released, so then it had space to fill over here in a way where the current just went in that way and then down through here, and then maybe also connected up into this and did that at that time. Parted the Red Sea, maybe. I don't know. I don't know. And it doesn't make total sense because I have been kind of leaning towards the glacier melts being like the younger dryas glacier melts end of the ice age concept being the end of the global flood in terms of like when the waters were retreating and all of the, but maybe the flood was significant, like 66 million years radiometric dating or before even, and then Moses was alive at like 30 million radiometric dating when the Red Seas were parted. And then it just continued to get closer and closer to the present, while the amount of actual time passing obviously is the same throughout, like tick, tick, ding, ding, but the radiometric time begins to slow to a point where it's at today's decay rate. So then it looks like what was like when the glaciers melted was whatever time when it was maybe a little closer than it was to make it in line. feel like there's a high probability that these things can be tied together somehow and actually understood. Although whether or not what I'm saying about this has anything to do with that, I don't know. That would be cool though. It would be cool though. Wouldn't it be cool? Okay. Do I keep going? Did I even say what I was gonna say? I generally was wanting to say that the storm, when it was here, put out a current in these two directions, and we can see its ring. So I kind of got that, and then it flowed around. We can see the next ring, which is really cool, and then even another like secondary ring of the other side of the current that flowed down this, creating another ring that goes up there. So this current went up this way, and maybe the current that created the Himalayas went across here and just kept going this way. Because that's what's happening, is this current is pushing a mound over here, just continuously compressing, while this current over here is pushing up this way. So this region just gets compressed and compressed and compressed, especially after the supernova event, when I guess the currents like increase velocity maybe throughout the entire globe. Maybe all of these currents like burp to a point where like right here just went bing and crystallized a mountain range in a vibrational state that is just so cool. But so the current definitely goes that way and just continues over, and it almost like, of all the currents I've looked at, looks the most reasonable of the ones to like go right there. Straight there though. Maybe it just went straight over there with some degree of difference in this region. Depending on, let's look at the Himalayas. I think it's like 30, 20 million years. Began to form 40 to 50. I know I just do too much freaking looking around. I forget so many things. I wrote it down. I don't want to stop and pull out my notebook and try to find all that kind of information. Whatever. So this initial is probably when the current's coming up this way. So it generally goes that way and that way, but also goes upward, I guess. And maybe downward, like sliding off both sides to kind of like as it creates a mound. Maybe this was the direction of the current. It was probably here though. I think it was just atop it and just building a mound to the side. That makes more sense. And over here. Okay. And maybe it's just generally flowing up here. Okay, so this current though does appear to go right up through here. Through here, which kind of makes sense then if it's going this way. That it's colliding with currents going like this way. Around here. From here. and around here. So it's colliding, it should be colliding here. I'm surprised there's not like a substantial feature. There's this. So maybe there was like a... It's just kind of odd. I guess there's another ring around it. It probably is related to the crossing of the current. But then it continues over here and crosses again around this way. It's kind of here. It's a little off center over there. If it's really, I feel like maybe it just created this wall, and then this current created this wall. So anything coming in here just kind of was caused to swirl into this center point rather than like where they crossed exactly. It's a little odd. And then it keeps going. And now that current seems to go like right over this point, which has almost like a spiral galaxy looking thing. I don't want to say swastika, but it does kind of look like that too. Although I should be able to say that because like it's almost like given the person with hostages what they want. You want to be able to like take a symbol that's ancient and has nothing to do with anything going on in the 1930s and associate it exclusively with what you're doing in the 1930s. Makes no sense, dude. And okay, well, I'll just notice while I was saying that is this appears to have a pretty distinct like current there, right there. It's a little odd. Where is that even coming from? It's almost like before the Earth expanded. Maybe this region was even vibratory, where this current maybe was actually going more up this way through here to basically come out right there along this line. Which maybe it was before the, like, where I just moused over just happened to be, like, the center point of the Tarim, this, like, positive negative feature here. Which does look like it's generally in line with that segment there. Although this makes me think it just is straight there. It's hard to say. There it looks kind of like it. Although it doesn't necessarily look related to up here. This region just underwent shape-shifting, a lot of novas for sure, so it's hard to say. What happened? But generally speaking, there's a current flowing across this way. Okay, we can see that one. And we can even see there's a current, generally speaking, flowing across here. From, like, this eyeball. The tear. It's, like, crying this way. Well, it's, like, inverse crying upside down. Because it really looks like it would be crying this way. This way. Which then kind of makes its way in there, I guess. Straight across. Just straight across. 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 Here. Okay, then that current. Now we're getting to what I wanted to initially talk about. the other thing. It'd probably be good to just make another video of this. I'm realizing I'm like, I bury so much stuff behind just me talking for an hour and then suddenly something cool and it's not even about what I was talking about. So maybe it'd be good to just make another one. Yeah, this is an hour. Let me just give a little memory to myself. And it's just like prequel, maybe a setup. Okay, let's do that. And then I'll talk about this and think about it more when I make another one. Okay. So, with that in mind, I noticed, generally speaking, this shape here. Okay, it's working. I was like, big ol' hexagon, and that thing I was just kind of following, right down to the center of the big ol' hexagon. And if we look at Earth, right here, I don't know if it goes out like right now. So this is what's interesting is the present Earth. It's not what's interesting, but it's another interesting feature part of me. The present Earth has something more like that. And then like that. And then kind of just over here a bit, I guess. Making, again, a hexagon type shape. So I was just thinking before, just so I record this real quick, is that main current cutting across here has a secondary current coming this way. And so there's a boundary that then fills up with a small channel through. And maybe even fills up like a triangle. Like I've been talking about those triangles a lot. Definitely fills up like a triangle. Probably plays into Texas's Texasness. Okay. So my thought is it's probably plausible to do a very similar thing to what I did with the Deccan Traps and with Sarastra, where I map the currents across time to kind of be like, okay, initially, it was like this. There's a current generally cutting across that, like, none of this really existed. The magnet, just imagine the Earth was stable and balanced equilibrium, and like magnetic anomalies didn't really have the same detectability as today, maybe something of that nature, and then like suddenly this, or maybe they just were different completely, and were reshaped to essentially the point of why I'm saying that is that like this whole map was just formed by currents. This map is just purely currents that flowed when the earth expanded at the end. Like nothing else. It's not showing really anything else about the earth, as crazy as that is. It's only showing essentially the currents that flowed when the earth was expanding and how they compiled mounds across that phase. And maybe it's also capturing like pre-existing like mounds of material that were there that are kind of maybe visible, but I'm not even sure if that was the case or if it just was energetically the case in some way. I mean, certainly the earth had like an ammonite type shape for these currents to flow along, so it had at least some kind of structure that was more than just purely uniform, but it may not have been like even remotely like this, to the point where essentially this is just, we can just say this map was formed by currents flowing under the Earth's crust. And maybe, so we figured out like there's a current coming in up this way into Canada, making like eddies here. So there's generally a current coming this way from the from Europe and from the, I think from Europe, yeah, probably just from Europe. And then this one actually maybe this right here, where this, where Nova Scotia, where the Nova center of Nova Scotia is, maybe this one here is where or this line maybe is related to where it came from Africa specifically, and not from under Europe, because essentially a portion came in here specifically, and another portion came across here. So they're really not directly adjacent currents, where there was a gap between them that maybe plays into like here. Let's see, where is Spain? Spain was like here. Spain was like here. So there's a current coming in from Africa, from this chunk that went above Africa, right here. This was that current. And then up here was a second current coming first this way, above it, and then also into it. And then these currents collided maybe here, shaping some of this region. Okay. So, in closing, I believe that we could probably map, like, be like, okay, once this triangle is formed, then I can make another map and be like, then there's a triangle, and then this causes like the current to essentially preferentially tend towards a certain way, and essentially just sequentially make enough like guesses of what maybe occurred to essentially come up with something that matches like when the regions underwent certain things, and figure it out, because that's all we can do is guess until educated guesses, but sooner or later, like more and more precisely, it's still approximations until it approaches such accuracy that it's indistinguishable from, but there's still like to anyone wants, like, who knows more, like there's always like greater truths that are just missed in the things again, and that's just reality. And I don't know if there's a way around it except for us to figure out the truth and like teach it to society as a people. In the same way we teach what we teach, we instead teach the actual truth. I don't know, just spitball in here. I'm not saying what I'm saying is the actual truth, but certainly it's closer to it than the the stepping stone of history that we are standing upon right now in our collective understanding. Until Hexagon, guys. See you soon. Hexagon Triangle. Till then.